Good.
All right. So, good morning. Good morning. My voice is good.
All right. And how's the level for mine? Is that working out for you? I got a bit of a talking away there. That's about, I'll talk
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
even keel. I don't think I'll talk louder.
Now, there we go. We're good. So,
Good.
so here we go. So, good morning, and I'm going to walk a mile with Rick Fines this morning. Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Joe. Nice to hear your voice.
It's good to hear yours. Now, I have to say that I did hear it the other night when you were doing your show. Songs that your mother wouldn't like. I
Oh,
happened
that's
to.
right. I saw you were on that.
Yeah, I caught that. That was a very cool thing. Yeah,
Yeah, isn't that a nice thing? I was very happy that Ian Tamlin asked me to be part of that. You know, Ian, I've looked up to Ian for many years, and of course, Ian's got over 40 albums out. You know, he's a prolific songwriter.
yeah. He's one of Canada's really unsung heroes. Although he got the Governor General's Award this year, but it's interesting how in the broader public he's not that well known, right?
Well, and such is the life of a folk singer, right? Like, you know, it's not mainstream radio stuff.
Yeah. So, do you call yourself a folk singer, Rick?
You know, I'm as comfortable or more comfortable with that than I am a blues man. I never really. I always said I know who the blues men are. I've spent a lot of hours studying their music. You know, for years and years and years, I sat there moving the needle back on the record player and learning how to play the music created by the blues men. It's a different culture, a different place, something that I owe a huge debt to, and I'm not a blues man. Folk singer? Yeah, sure, I'm a folk singer.
Well, you know what? In getting ready to talk to you again this morning, I went through some of my records, and something like 29 years ago, you and I talked about Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee on a radio show called Handmade Music.
Right, yes, I remember that.
So now those guys were, blues guys. I mean, they were who you were talking about at that point. But
that's right, and those are the blues men, and I spent a lot of time imitating and learning from the real blues men, from their records, and that's why I differentiate myself. I'm influenced by them, but that was I'm not African American. I didn't go through that whole experience, and that created the blues in the first place. So that's where I draw the line. I don't care if anyone else calls himself a blues man. That's their business. But for me personally, I don't consider myself that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So now you're playing, at that point, you were playing with Jackson Delta, right? So,
Yep.
and you kind of build yourself as a blues trio there, but you know what? As you say that, I completely get what you're saying. You don't feel like you really have the right to call you. Am I getting this right? You don't really feel you have the right to call yourself a blues guy.
That's exactly the case. In my opinion of myself, I don't bother casting judgment on others. But in my opinion of myself, I'm not comfortable with it. A lot of journalists over the years have written it up, said bluesman Rick Fines in an article, and I remember when I first sort of read that, and I was quite young, and I swelled up with pride. And the next time I read it, I thought, how would B.B. King feel about that? Or how would, Big Bill Brunsey feel about this Icelandic Canadian guy being called a blues man?
It's so interesting how cultural backgrounds are being brought to the fore now, right? I mean, almost in every sector of society. I didn't know you had an Icelandic background.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I'm three-quarters Icelandic. My father was half Icelandic, and my mother was entirely Icelandic.
So tell me, like, music kind of, we always say music crosses a lot of boundaries. So does that not cut you a little bit of slack in terms of, I guess, I mean, as far as the style of music you play, people might go, well, that's a Delta blues sound, or Uh, does music really cross all those boundaries or not?
Absolutely. I don't think that I don't think a person should limit themselves to what they play. But when but at the same time, I do not believe that when I'm playing Delta style blues that I'm a Delta blues man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And but audiences love it. They hear what you're playing and they connect with it, which is really, I guess, what it's all about, right?
Oh, for sure. And it's an honor to play that music. If you take a look at somebody, if you're talking about folk singers and blues music, but take a look at somebody like Woody Guthrie. And Woody Guthrie wrote a lot of songs that borrowed very heavily from the blues, genre, from the
Sure,
blues idiom.
sure, sure. So now tell me, if you don't mind, who are you listening to now as for in terms of folk singers? Who's in that sort of sphere of influence and that you would consider to be, peers and colleagues and that kind of stuff?
Oh my goodness! Having not gone out near as much for the last 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly not interacted and gone to any folk festivals, it's hard to say because it's been 2 years since I have actively. Now, when I'm at home, these days I fall into little cycles of listening to things. So these days, when I'm at home, I'm back to listening to old Mississippi John Hurt stuff, and again, moving the needle back and working on getting note for note what he did, because there are things that I never picked up long ago that I wish I had, and that's where I'm at. When I look to who are my favorite folk artists in Canada, oh my goodness,
It's a long list, eh?
it would be people like David Francie and Lynn Miles, and the list would go on
Yeah,
and on.
yeah, yeah. I don't want to put you on the spot in terms of that. I just, I mean, I do. I mean, I know. I looked at one of your previous CDs and I saw that you had actually recorded a John Gorka song on an early CD with when you were doing it with Susie Vinnick. "Love Is My Cross to Bear." And I thought, wow, I didn't know that that would be a style and a type of song that you would cover. So the palette, I guess what we're really talking about is the palette of music that informs your stuff.
Yeah, and so on my latest one, I recorded a Jesse Winchester song too,
Mm.
I don't feel like I could do justice to everything that John Gorka did, but there was a time, and my goodness, was that all the way back in the '80s, maybe
Yeah, I think
that
it
I was
was.
buying every John Gorka album and listening to everything,
No kidding.
and
Yeah,
well, he'd show up at a festival. Again, it comes back to the folk festivals of Canada,
right.
where there are workshops and you get to sit and play and exchange songs with people like David Francie and Lynn Miles and John Gorka and
Yeah, how
and
great is
others,
that?
and we have that sort of interactive experience. The next thing you do, you're getting the album and listening to it.
Yeah. So during the pandemic, I know everybody was isolated. I kind of gathered that you spent some time playing that new resonator guitar you got.
Yeah, and it gets better. So I bought a tricone. I wanted a national tricone all my life, and it came up at the worst time. I had no work and no money, and an opportunity to buy one for about half what they cost new came up, and so I sold 6 guitars and bought that, and I've been playing the tricone all the time. Well, one of the inspirations for that was a friend of mine had a style O, and he when he was getting it, he had it dropped off to my place, and then he picked it up a couple of days later. So I had it for a while,
Yeah.
and the volume and the sound, I just thought to myself, I've wanted one of these all my life. If I get a chance, I'm going to get one, and And then anyway, he's now dropped by with that guitar. He said, "You know what? I haven't played this for the last 2 years, and I'm guilty of it sitting there. Would you look after it for me for a couple of weeks?" So now I've got a Style 1 tricone and a Style O, like the famous one from Brothers in Arms, you know.
Yep.
So I've got two of them sitting here, these big brass-bodied, nickel-plated.
Yeah. Well, you know what?
Steels.
So the other night I was listening hard because it was coincidental that I was signed on to that, and I was hearing you play, and I mean I've always loved the way you finger pick and slide, but there was an integration of both in that song you did the other night, which I thought, wow, that is very complex, difficult stuff to do, and you were leaning into it pretty good and enjoying it, I could tell. And so, yeah, so, you know, how do you feel about your development with your new baby?
I love it, and you know, it does all the things that I've done with other resonator guitars. It does them louder. It doesn't do all the things because you can't access past the 12th fret easily, and so it limits me, and so I like working within the limits because sometimes it's good to play within the boundaries. And the other thing I found is I'm using a capo a lot more and going up the neck and playing some banjo riffs, some banjo trailing techniques on the National Steel.
Yeah, that's a different color, isn't it, eh?
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. So listen, we need to get down to some business here. You've been nominated for Canadian Folk Music Awards, like 3 of them. You know, Folk Music English Songwriter of the Year, Solo Artist, Contemporary Album of the Year. Like, wow, buddy, how does that feel?
It feels pretty amazing because it's my first time being nominated for Canadian Folk Music Awards, and I got nominated for 3 of them.
Yeah.
This album really has taken off that way. I mean, I got a Juno nomination. I'm also in June. I'm nominated for 2 Maple Blues Awards as well for this album. So
we're talking
it's the
about
most recognition I've ever had in my career for one album.
So we're talking about Solar Powered 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's
TOO.
Yeah, TO Solar Powered 2. So for those of you who are out there looking for it on, you know, your favorite streaming service or in your local record store, I don't even know. Can they find it as a CD somewhere, Rick?
You know, I think it's hard to walk into a store and find it there unless the person there, you know, is interested in stalking me. And I don't know. I mean that STOCK. And I don't know who does that. But I mostly it's online sales through rickfinds.ca.
Yeah. You did some streaming concerts as well, and did that work for you?
Yes. You know, when the first streaming concert started, just about 2 years ago, I did remarkably well. People were hungry to go out and listen to music, and it was all shut down. And I did a couple of them that paid as well as going and doing a big show, in a theater.
Nice.
And then I did a couple that paid less than that as people got a little more used to it or a little more tired of it or whatever. And so I've done a full spectrum of those.
Yep. Well, you've been your own manager for like pretty much your whole career, I guess, right?
Yes, which also makes me my own mismanager of my career.
But think of all the money that your manager's been making for you.
Yes, that's right.
So I just want to talk a little bit about, it's a pretty solo life you live as a folk singer, although you've done lots of collaborations. I mentioned earlier Jackson Delta and Susie Vinnick, and I was also interested to hear or to see again about Bobby Watson, the project you supported with Bobby Watson. I was reminded of that. And you've always been that guy in Peterborough, Ontario, who supported the local music scene, and Don Skuse and his shop and collection of guitars and what he meant to the Peterborough community. Now, below the surface, was that in direct response to Don's passing away?
It was. Buzz Thompson had just passed away before that, and Jan Shute, who is another local musician, and so we were really feeling it in this town, feeling the loss of some of our iconic musical figures in the town, and I was just thinking about the people left sitting at home in their absence.
Yep. And I'm also remembering Colleen Peterson.
Oh yeah.
Wow. I mean,
yeah, and so young, at the time. I mean, Colleen was, I don't know how much older than me, 10 or 12 years older than me or something like that. I don't know. But she passed away at the young age of 46.
Yep, yep. And such a voice, right? I mean, she was, yeah.
She was a stellar musician in every respect.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Rick, we're coming up on, 3/4 of our mile here. And I just, where are you going to go next? Obviously you've been a collaborator. You've certainly been a solo artist, writer, recorder. You've worked with Alec for a number of years as a producer. What's next? What do you think is going to happen next?
Well, I'm excited about some recordings I'm doing at my home with the lock-in and everything. I got spending more time. I generally like to do recordings with other people. I find that I get too inside my head by myself. But I've ended up, enjoying a little bit of that process and learning a little bit more about the process. I used to record when it was where you moved knobs and sliders and doing it all on a computer. I find a little frustrating. But I'm getting a little bit more into that. I've now accumulated a whole lot of song ideas and only a couple of bits and pieces and nothing really new written entirely.
Yep.
So I'm entering into that phase where I'll be sitting down and saying, okay, this is something, I've got to turn it into something, and that'll lead to another album. But it may take a couple of years.
Sure. Maybe just talk a minute about your relationship with Alec Fraser as your producer.
Sure. Alec was my neighbor when I moved to Toronto many, many years ago, 30 years ago. And I heard him playing somewhere and talked to him, and we talked about getting together and found out we lived within a couple blocks of each other. Next thing you know, we formed a little band called the Friendly Neighbors. And we would get together and record. And back then, we were recording with DAT machines. And we literally recording direct to stereo DAT machines. So we'd do a recording with ourselves and a few of our neighbors who were also stellar musicians. And then we'd say, no, you know what, the piano's too loud here. So we'd move all the musicians and their microphones further away from the piano and turn the piano microphones down a little bit, record the whole song again. And it was an incredible way of recording. It's just an old-fashioned way, through what was then the new technology of digital recording.
Yes, wow. Well, do you think, is it safe to say, like, a relationship like yours with Alec, I mean, there's a few people that you can really work with, right? That you meet in your creative life, and obviously he's one of those guys, right?
The thing about Alec is that Alec and I both agree on what we want, what the goal is very easy with us. There's never a push and pull about what we want something to sound like. If there's something, if one of us has a strong opinion, then the other one listens and usually agrees. And so we work together very well.
How great is that, right?
It's the best because, when Alex says, nope, that was the take, and I say, I want to do it one more time. He says, you can do it one more time if you want, that's the take. And when I do the one more time, I realize when I'm done, yeah, he's right.
He's right. I had it.
That other one was better. I was fixated on one little problem I had with my guitar part, and nobody will hear it other than me.
Yeah. I was interested to hear you talk about when you were recording Solar Power 2, and he was saying, you know what, we need percussion. We got to have percussion here. and he, sort of said, we got to go to Toronto and get Gary Craig on the drums.
Yeah, Alec had a very firm vision. By the time we'd recorded the whole album up at my little cabin in the gazebo, and we're listening back, and Alec said, these 5 songs, I think we need to go into Peter Moore's studio and bring Gary Craig in and have Gary playing that kit of drums in that room with Peter, at the board,
yep,
and record that.
Yeah.
And he was right. It was a good vision, and that made those songs much more powerful.
I guess the proof's kind of in the pudding, isn't it, eh?
Exactly, and it's still just, it fit in seamlessly and sounds naturally. Like, you don't hear like, one sounds like it's in a gazebo, and the rest of them sound like they're in a high-end studio. You can't tell the difference. You can't tell that they weren't all done in the same sessions, because we were getting the quality in the gazebo.
Yeah. So great. Well, listen, I want to ask you about one of my favorite songs of yours, and it's In the Arms of What Will Be, Solar Powered One. What's the genesis of that song?
In the Arms of What Will Be. I had written that song, and it was basically done. And I'd written another song that contained the phrase, "We could live like Henry Thoreau." And I realized I'm sitting at this cabin in the woods, basically the same dimensions as Thoreau's cabin, and I've never read Walden. So I picked up a copy of Walden, and upon reading it, I read this quote that said, "Time is but a stream." And I thought, oh, wait a second, this belongs in that song. This is a better line than my first line. I got to borrow it.
Yeah.
So I put it as nice. The very opening line of that song.
So beautiful. Yeah, it's so beautiful. And it's just a great tune. I really love it. Well, I like all your stuff, as you probably know.
Oh, thanks, Joe.
Well, listen, buddy, we're coming up at the end of our mile. Anything you'd like to add?
I would just like to say that as I reflect back, I turned 60 a couple of weeks ago, and as I reflect back on my life, my gratitude for a life in music is immense. The people that I've got to work with over the years, and the people who've come out, and people who made it possible for me to make a living for more than 40 years in the music business is, it boggles my mind. I started off as a kid who wanted to play guitar, and it just kept evolving into what it evolved into. And gratitude is my message.
That's a beauty way to close.
Great.